Hi everyone and welcome. We'll get started. I just want to go over some housekeeping things before we get started. This session is being recorded and it'll be accessible to all attendees and will be provided after today's session. We are going to encourage you to submit questions and comments via the QA tab as well. Depending on the time we have at the end of the session, we'll answer as many of these as we can, and we want you to really enjoy the webinar. So welcome everyone. Good morning to those attending from Australia. And good afternoon to those attending from New Zealand. My name is Pete from Generation E, and I'm going to host today's session. It's great to see so many interested people from a wide range of organisations and roles joining us today to learn more about Copilot and how we can deploy, use it, and get value out of it. Over the past 2 years, since we started working with Copilot, we have seen some huge changes in the product's maturity. The way we use it has evolved, and we have learned a lot about how to successfully deploy it into organizations at scale. Copilot continues to evolve rapidly, but we have found some fundamental principles have reoccurred throughout all our Copilot deployments, and our presenters today are going to share those with you. So presenting today, we have Rosemary, Head of AI Adoption and Employee Experience at Generation E, and we also have Ben, Senior AI Functional Consultant and Change Manager for Generation E. Today's session is all about getting practical with Microsoft 365 Copilot implementations. We hope that you enjoy the conversations between Rosemary and Ben, and they're going to cut back the jargon, taking out the fluff, and we'll give you a real talk about what works and what doesn't when it comes to deploying Copilot. Also focusing on some of the lessons we've learned along the way. So basically from here, I am going to hand you over to Rosemary and Ben.
Fantastic. Thanks, Pete. Welcome, everybody. We really do hope that you enjoy today's session. I'm Rosemary. As Pete said, so I head up our AI adoption and employee experience practices at Generation E, and Ben is joining us for the conversation today. We thought we would get started just to position or just to get an understanding of where you are in your Copilot journey. So we're just going to pop a poll up. Pete, can you launch that poll for us? Just to get an understanding of where you are at the moment. So is your organisation just exploring? So you're still at the curiosity phase. So you've got a few people that are trying it out. Have you got a fair few people within the organisation using Copilot? So you've got pockets of value, but you don't really have a full plan yet? Or are you rolling it out with a plan? So you've got targeted outcomes and you're measuring. So if people could just answer that poll for us, that would be fantastic. Just give that a moment so we can see those results as they come in. Fantastic. So it looks like we've got lots of people kind of at that second stage. Some people are using it. You're getting pockets of value, but you don't have a real plan yet. That's the majority of the people are sitting at the moment. So, which is good because this is what this presentation is all about. So hopefully we can have more of those people move to a plan. All right, so Copilot has been around for about the last 2.5 years now. And what we found is Copilot has started, it's really started with curiosity. And we've started to see, as we launched this, that we've had personal productivity gains. So individuals have been achieving lots. It's proved real value for individuals. We've seen leaders that have been able to reduce time spent on low-level admin tasks, allowing them to focus on higher value tasks. We've seen everybody across organisations drafting new documents, rewriting context. We've seen our analysts and our data specialists really being able to dive deep into the data that they have control over. HR have been really strong adopters of this, whether it's helping them draft policies, whether it's creating agents that have had, allowing people to access company policies, prepping onboarding material. We've seen service teams use it again to answer those continual questions that they come through. And this really is where we start to see some of those wins and providing genuine value to those individuals, making it easier for people to do their work and to start adopting it because they're getting some value as individuals. However, these individual wins, they don't compound on their own. And so what we really want to start talking to you about in this session is how do we get broader value from our from Copilot? How do we make sure that we can actually see value across the organization and that it's not just these individual wins, because we do hit a ceiling and we're not getting any further in that. We have also seen that curiosity has started really with Copilot chat is a really great entry point. So if we do have people we had some organizations who really didn't have much of a plan, starting with Copilot chat, really minimal barrier to entry as it's a free tool. It comes as part of your Microsoft subscription. And then you can start building that habit of using generative AI and then moving it into more broader value. Ben, do we want to kind of talk about then how we take, or what we mean by looking at that personal productivity value and moving it into more of a whole process?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Rosemary. So yeah, like Rosemary said, we've been working with clients for over the past couple of years and really just looking at, how are people getting value out of it? And personal productivity is great. We can do all of that. But the conversation switches into, we understand that each of our roles, we're doing specific things. So we're drafting an email, we are getting meeting summaries, all those sorts of things, we're getting wins there. But when we talk at a business level, the reality is that whatever that individual task is, it's usually part of a bigger workflow or process. And while we can focus on that individual task and that and getting some wins there, we need to start thinking, where does this fit into the broader picture? What are we doing, or why does that meeting summary need to be done? Why are we writing this email in the first place? And what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve overall? So on this graphic, you see, the yellow box, that's usually where we sit with personal productivity. We're doing some sort of action, but the reality is there's a reason why we have to do the action. So there are some things that happen before, and there'll be some things that happen after we write that email or fill in that form or whatever. And so there's an opportunity for us to think, how do we integrate Copilot and AI across the whole process rather than just looking at our individual task? And that takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more discussion. And that's where we want to talk to you about the process today. And Rosemary has a really good example of how we can start thinking about that, not just with Copilot, but also agentic AI and how we can create other AI experiences within the Microsoft platform to solve for that whole process.
Yeah, so we thought we'd just show you. This was an agent that we were working with a client. So for any of our council members that are on the call today, you will get a lot of freedom of information requests come through, and it is a time-consuming process. And as Ben was showing, we've got that intake, we have to triage them, we have to draft our responses, we have to get approval, and we have to then log that and send it out. It is a really big process. And as we were working with the client, there was an individual there who says, actually, I need to get consistency in how I draft my response. So we drafted up an agent so that they could have that consistency. So here, we want to create a draft. I'm just going to pop in email there to respond to a particular email request that they got in. So we'll just add that email in here. Oops, not that one. I know it's a live demo, everyone. So this is their a freedom of information request for internal communication and briefings on a smart parking rollout. So when we built this agent, there were a lot of different instructions that came into this draft. And you'll see as it produces it that there is things that they have to go back and check and get approval for in this process. But this agent was guiding them as to what they needed to do here. So here we've got what the subject is, we've got the introduction. Here we've got the request, what it is, and it runs through all of that information for this person, and it's calling out where they need to be careful in this process. So this certainly helps that individuals speed up what it is that they need to draft in their response, but we're not considering the whole process as we go through this. And what we're seeing now is this real shift from individual productivity gains and into looking further at that whole process. So the next stage here would be to build out a much broader process, and how do we fit AI into all of that, and what is the actual goal that we want to achieve. So this did save this individual significant amounts of time in drafting their responses and guiding them on what they needed to do, but didn't change the whole process overall. And that's what we want to look at here. Ben, anything else you want to add into that, moving it from task to whole process? I'll just bring that back up.
Yeah, I think, what we're doing here is just thinking about, what are the capabilities that we have on hand? And sometimes it might be an agent, sometimes it might just be Copilot, but we also need to think about who is going to be using this tool. So an agent could be used by other people as well. We're not just using a fancy prompt. It can be scoped to other people as well. And it lets us build out different aspects of it as well. So you might have an agent that can help provide that draft, or you might have an agent that can do some of that research on what the materials are, and even doing another agent that does some sense checking across it all. But the idea here is that we have these capabilities available to us, but to get the outcome, as Rosemary said, we need to know, what are we trying to achieve, and then addressing the whole workflow.
Yep, fantastic. And then we also need to look at where we are as an organisation in terms of our AI maturity. And so we've kind of mapped this out. I guess Ben and I both have change management backgrounds, so we tend to talk in change language. So anyone who's come from a change background will understand this crawl, walk, run, fly, soar methodology that we do kind of talk of. But it really talks about that journey that organisations go on and that people go on as we learn and change the way in which we behave. And so this is really understanding about where you're at in your journey and how you move from one stage to the next. And you kind of need to go through these stages as well. Ben, do you want to add some info in here?
Yeah, let's talk it through. So if we're thinking about the crawl stage, it's really about people being aware that AI is here. And I think, where we are now, I think people are pretty aware of generative AI. I think the challenge for us from a change perspective is trying to balance some of the hype and the expectation of what AI can do, what's achievable, and what we can actually do in-house. But that crawl, that foundation, that awareness is there. So where we talk about personal productivity, it's where people are, sort of doing two things. One, they might be getting AI or Copilot to help them with an existing task, like that draft, or like doing some of that research. And that's great, right? So that's your walk phase, and where we see a lot of people spending a lot of time. The next step there is augmenting. So as an individual, can I do one more extra thing with the tool? Can I get it to maybe help me schedule some meetings as part of a process? Maybe I'm exploring the use of a personal agent that I can scope to a certain role or a certain task, but it's still about me and my productivity. I guess where we're seeing that jump now is this idea of transformation across a team or a business process, and how do we address our business processes with AI. And in the future, once we have that in place, there's a real opportunity to think more broadly about what AI can offer. So whether that is a complete overhaul of the way that we operate and the way that we do things, and also potentially new opportunities that weren't available before, that we can do now with AI.
I was going to say, also, Ben, talking about that fly component, when we look at that team transformation, it's really about getting that consistent, repeatable use of AI in your business process for your business outcomes. So support as a leader, supporting your team in actually what that process is going to change, making sure that the entire team is on board with that process and that it's really clear in what you want it to do, which almost sounds contradictory to what generative AI kind of came on, because everything was created, it will always create a new response and it'll create something new every time it runs. But actually now we're trying to make it more consistent and the experience more consistent, and the stages that our teams use it in for the business outcome to be more designed and more structured and more intentional, so that we get that full team transformation. Wouldn't you say, Ben?
I think, yeah, I didn't want to. I was going to say what you've touched on there is really important. That this is a team thing. It becomes an organization level approach to AI. It's no longer just somebody using it by themselves. It switches the way that you think about how you're using it, and even how you're solutioning for it as well, because you need to take into consideration other aspects of how you run your business. It isn't always just about AI either. We'll find that there are a lot of other things that we need to get right in order for the fly and the saw components to work.
Yeah, fantastic. So how do we, Ben, move to, what does it take for us to move to run Copilot across our whole business process? Because it isn't just about a clever prompt or someone being really amazing with being able to use AI. It really is that focused approach to it, and that's what we look at when we look at that maturity model. But I think should we talk about a little bit of what stalls AI to get the negatives out of the way?
Yeah, I think to understand what it needs, I think we can share some stories about where things haven't worked, because it'll probably reveal that, as we said, it's not necessarily about the AI, it's about other things. Yeah. So I think on that first, so we have a few things that we've seen across the board as we work with clients, as they're trying to move from that personal productivity into this business transformation. So we've mentioned this before, but one, the hype. So there's so much hype around what's possible with AI. There's lots of news stories, but when we come to trying to implement it internally, we need to know what's realistic and what's going to match the way that our people work, so that hype outruns habits. Like, people are thinking bigger than what's realistic today.
And what's allowed in their organisation as well. So the organisation hasn't caught up to some of that hype as well. It creates frustration, which is where we come to some of these others. So that missing middle is where we look at our executives are really visionary. They want to take all of that hype and run it, but we haven't put any support models around how we actually do that. We haven't set any patterns for how that will work. We haven't empowered our leaders. We haven't set any framework up for actually how we're going to implement it on a broader scale beyond that curiosity and the personal productivity. We're not empowering the organisation to do that, particularly that middle level of management. And then I guess another area where we see it stall is in relation to governance. So last week, Sean ran a webinar that we talked about some of that governance components, but it's that oversharing and the risk anxiety, and really understanding what can it see, what can it do, where does it go, not having things set up to a level that maybe we should have. I don't think any organisation has followed all of Microsoft's guidance, for example, over the last 10 years about setting up things like sensitivity labels and data loss prevention and SharePoint Advanced Management. I don't think there is anyone that's put that in, because we haven't really seen a need for it. And now all of a sudden AI is showing us that there is a defined need for that. So they stop allowing people to do certain things, and then that hype fades away and people go, I can't really do what I need to do.
I think often we say, everything old is new again. So all of those old projects that have been put on the back burner, all of a sudden AI is now driving those conversations. So we're seeing, as we roll out Copilot and we do pilots with clients, they're often also doing a Microsoft Purview rollout at the same time, or doing an assessment of their SharePoint data and having those big conversations about who owns the data, who's responsible for it, and then also checking all of your permissions and things like that. So yeah, all of those old conversations need to be had again, because AI's bringing it all to the front. Yeah, I think, and once people are into it, I think the other thing is the assumption that once you turn AI on, then that is going to be it, and people will start using it. But the reality is that we need to have this constant adoption. The space is moving so quickly. There are new things that come out all the time. The user interfaces change on a regular basis. And so really just making sure that it isn't just a static one and done, that we have to keep moving forward. And then also then having some realistic goals about, well, what are we trying to achieve? So having those use cases that we can put not only some measures against, but also put some training alongside, so that we can be really specific with the examples that are given, or really just make sure that we can help people connect the dots between what Copilot and AI is capable of and how it relates to their everyday work.
Yeah. So Ben, should we tell people what we actually think they need to do now on a positive side, what the drivers are to help get you to where you need to be? What are the components that sit in an AI transformation? So we kind of see that it comes under 5 different drivers, and bringing all of these together is what builds out successful Copilot or successful use of AI across the organisation. So the first of that is your AI strategy and your leadership. So how you deliberately plan to invest and evolve your AI, your business strategy. So AI shouldn't ever just sit alone. It really does need to support the rest of the business strategy. So it should be an enabler for you to achieve your business strategy and not just sit alone there from an AI strategy perspective. The governance and security is really important in terms of how you manage the risk. Make sure that your people feel confident in it. The data and technology, like we talked about, where does that data sit? How does it work? What the data quality is? That all changes. And then, of course, the organisation and the culture. So how do you allow people to adopt it? How do you create this positive AI culture?
Yeah. And I think you can see that here. A lot of the time we get brought into a project and we'll be talking to an IT lead, which is natural for our the way we engage clients. But very soon the conversation has to include anyone who's responsible for information management, or anyone who's responsible for learning and development. And we also end up talking with executives and senior leaders, because without all of these pieces in place, you won't have that foundation to build on in the future as well. So it's really important that, as Rosemary said, this isn't, and like the AI conversation doesn't sit with tech, for example, or solely with tech. It has to be had across the whole org. Everyone needs to be on board with this.
Yeah.
I guess so on this slide, the reality is that each of those elements, those 5 drivers, it can be hard to know where to start, because you might be strong in one, but not as strong in another. And we think about, what does that mean for us? Or maybe we were wondering, where do we put our effort? What should we be trying to improve on? So if we were thinking about those 5 drivers, you could break down each of those into 5 levels. And so this, again, is a diagnostic. So it's a maturity model, thinking about where are we today across those 5 elements. So from like a 100 level to a 500 level, you might want to assess each of those points. So you might be, say, really strong on governance and security. So that might be a 400 or 500. You have all of your sensitivity labels sorted out. You have all of your policies in place, all of that. But you don't have a strong organization culture. You don't have people who are willing to explore, innovate, or learn. that might be at, say, like a 100 or 200 level. So that looks like an environment where people are locked down from a policy perspective, and they don't want to use the AI, or they don't want to try it, or they don't have the initiative to do it. Or you might have a really good organization culture of exploration and trying to do new things and innovate, but you don't have the strategy in place. And you just end up having a lot of people building or using AI in different ways. They are, they're creating their own agents and creating these amazing workflows, but nothing really connects with the broader business outcomes. And so if you're thinking about how do we know where to start, I'll be looking at those five drivers and then assessing where are we. If we could put ourselves from 100 to 500, where are we? And if there's anything under a 300, that might be where you want to start. And thinking about how do we move to the next levels? What are the things that we can do to move forward?
Fantastic. Then let's dive into some of our 5 capability drivers here. For me, AI strategy, leadership, and business strategy are a real key component for us getting longer term and broader value out of AI. And we've just put a couple of points up here. So being able to link that AI strategy with the broader business strategy. And what we mean by that is really that your AI strategy shouldn't be a standalone initiative. It shouldn't just be, we're going to drive AI into this organization and we're going to have, these are the AI tools that we're going to have, and this is what we're going to achieve. This is what we're going to do with AI. We're going to turn Copilot on, we're going to have Studio, we're going to build agents, we're going to do these things. If it doesn't then link in to the rest of the business strategy. So what you actually want to shift the thinking, particularly now as we move from that personal productivity and look at broader transformation across organizations, is looking at the broader business strategy and how can AI support those goals that we've got within that broader business strategy. So, for example, one of your business outcomes might be we need to run more community engagement. We need to have more face time with our members. We want to set up 3 new community engagement programs this year, but actually we can't increase our headcount by 3-fold to support those programs. So how can we capitalize on the benefits that AI gives our organization to meet those business goals that we need from that part of the business? So there it might be, you might look at, actually, we spend 50% of our week doing repetitive admin. Can AI take that away? So actually we can use that 50% of our time to be facing our community and run these programs. And that's where you start to see this AI actually supporting the business strategy and the business outcomes. And then you can say our return on investment for AI is we've been able to deliver 3 more community-based initiatives without increasing our headcount cost. And that's where you really start to then see the benefit of AI and not the, it only takes us 10 minutes to do that admin task, but not reinvesting what then you've created with that extra capacity that you've got in your team. Another really big passionate area of mine is our leadership cohort and supporting our leaders and giving them the skills to support their teams in this space. When we look at the use of AI and how we use it and how it's changed our way of working, we don't have a plethora of transferable skills in this space necessarily. So it is about guiding that leadership cohort in how do you lead in an era of AI? How do you encourage the curiosity but focus on the business outcomes, looking at that repetitive nature? How do you coach someone if they've got super excited about using it for everything, but maybe the quality of the work isn't where you need it to be? So how do you encourage the use of it, but also coach what your business expectations are for that? And so running programs that support that leadership cohort is really important. And then also guiding our leaders on how we do that intentional implementation and guiding our staff of what we actually want them to use AI for and where it actually needs to be either another tool or human driven component of their process, and getting that consistency across the team. So you don't just want one person who has adopted this really well and has completely changed the way in which they work across the process, and then you've got their colleague who is still doing things a traditional way and is drowning in the volume of work because expectations have changed as to what the team will now deliver. So it's supporting the entire team with that consistent use of AI as we go through. Ben, you've been running some leadership programs for some of our clients. What are some of the insights that you've found?
Yeah, I think, at a leadership level, it's easy to see the big news stories about innovations in AI and then wanting to apply those internally. I think, at a recent workshop, we started the conversation thinking, an agent could do this or an agent could do that, because that's what we're hearing in the news a lot about these agentic AI systems. But when we took a step back and we sort of connected what the leaders were thinking with what was happening on the ground and the actual processes, not everything has to be an agent, right? It could be a different method of data capture, or maybe we're operating with an outdated process where we're juggling 6 different spreadsheets and manually copying across each of them to get our data right. We don't necessarily need an agent for that. We need a better process overall. So trying to connect what leaders see at that sort of high level with what's happening on the ground is really important too, and trying to join the dots there, so that you're using AI intentionally, as it mentioned on the slide here.
Yeah, fantastic. The kind of the next area that controls our AI is, as we talked about, our governance, security, the technology, and the data. So it sets the guardrails before we scale to make sure that everyone is confident in being able to utilize the tools, that the business is comfortable with it, that risk component is taken away. Now we have a huge range of tools that sit right across the Microsoft stack, and Sean talked about some of those in last week's session, where we've got controlling of our identity with Entra, we've got our information management tools with SharePoint Advanced Management, our sensitivity labels, our life cycles, site life cycles with SharePoint, our SharePoint ownership. We've got our data security with Purview, and our DSPM, our data loss prevention, our insider risk. So all of those tools sit right across the Microsoft suite. And so previously we were kind of looking at all of those and trying to set them up individually and how they apply to AI. Microsoft have brought those AI controls together in one place for us with our Copilot control system. And more recently was released last month was Agent 365, which looks at controlling and giving us visibility of our agent space overall. What we thought we would do now is just to give you a little bit of an overview of some of those AI controls. So how we as organizations can control that AI experience for our people, making sure that we do stay 100% in control of what happens in the AI space in our organization. So I'll just bring up a demo. So this is our AI control system. So you need either a full global access to be an 365 admin, or you can have the AI admin role to be able to access this site. And what we can do here is come into our Copilot settings here. And then we can come down into our settings here, where we can start to see and manage how that AI tool works and what we can do with that. So I'll just run through and show you how we can be really specific with who has what access to our information. So say we come in and we want to control who has access to Frontier. So if anyone's not seen or heard about Frontier before, Frontier is Microsoft's kind of advanced program for access to some of the new AI agents that Microsoft has been creating. It's like a beta environment. So it's a good way to see what's coming, but it's also still experimental. So some of the features don't quite work properly. They will change as you're using them. You'll be able to do one thing one day, it'll change the next day. So potentially you don't want everyone in the organization to be able to have access to that, just to manage the experience. So say here we wanted to control who had access to that. So here we can come in, we've got complete control over that, and we can start to select the specific groups. So looking at our security groups, we can select who we want to have access to that. And now our Zava IT will be the ones that have access to that for us. So now we can control that. They're the only ones that have access to that. We can also look at our data access. So what access we've got set up, and what our, for example, what our agents are seeing. So here I might come in and look at our agent setup here. And again, I can be really specific with who I want to have access to our agents. So we can come in, be specific with that as to who we want to allow. So say we want to give our finance team access to that, and then we'll add in AI and sales and marketing there as well. And we can see then what they're allowed to do, and we can control that as well. So we can save that. So now we're getting some restriction on who has access to our agents. So again, as an organization, we're in control of that. We can come down and look more specifically at our agents. So there are two views that you'll see about agents when you look here. This is the Copilot control system. So this is available to all organizations that have Copilot licenses. You can see this. The more advanced and more detailed tool is Agent 365. That goes into more detail and is fantastic if you've really started to explore your agent pool. If you've got lots of agents in the organization, Agent 365 really allows you to manage that environment really well. So here we can see all of our agents. And again, I can come down and be really specific about our particular agents. And this is a way for us in IT to be able to see the information about that particular agent. So here I can see what that agent is about. I can see who has access to that agent and manage that control. So say we didn't want everyone in the organization to be able to have access to this agent. We wanted to, again, be really specific. So here I could bring this back to just IT, having access to that agent. So we can update that. Now it's just our Zava IT team that has access to that. Then we can come in and look at again, the details of that. So we can see the capabilities and the knowledge sources. We can look at the security and compliance. So what we've got set up for that. Come back again to our users, and then we can deploy that agent. And we can run through again that deployment process as well. So really simple for us to deploy it, defining who we want our users to be, making sure they've got the permissions that we want them to have, and then finishing that deployment. So again, just confirming who that group is, and then we can pin it for them as well. So they're actually going to be able to find that agent. So that's part of how we can manage our agents. We also have our billing and usage in here as well, so that we can manage that billing component. We won't go into details about that. So that's just a little bit of that control that you have over what's happening in your environment. Ben, do we want to talk more about the people component now?
Yeah. So if we think about how we're creating experiences, whether that's through enabling Copilot or using agents, ideally we want people to be able to adopt it, right? So we could have the greatest tech in the world, but if people don't use it, then it's not going to get us the outcome that we want. So a few of the really key things that we want to call out here from an organization and culture perspective is, one, having leadership who are visibly active and using AI themselves, or using whatever tool it is that we're providing, getting it out there that they are actively supporting it. It's a massive win if you can see that leadership are behind the use of the tool. Sharing wins, sharing challenges, and even highlighting what else is happening in the organization. So calling out when something goes really well, and providing some recognition there. Another part of the organization that we find challenge, or we've seen that can be a challenge, is when you get to a point where there's a SharePoint site or there's some data that has no formal ownership, that no one is responsible for the data. And so we feed that into, so someone's using Copilot, they feed that into Copilot, and it might be old, or it might be wrong, or it might be a draft, but no one is taking responsibility for that. So having a mature approach to managing your data and information is really important as well, to make sure you get the right results from Copilot. Another part that's been really valuable is where you have peer learning. So unlike some other IT rollouts where you can be really clear about, pressing this button gets you this result, with generative AI in particular, the way you prompt it, the data that it has access to, the way that you work as an individual as well and as a team will change the result. And so having opportunities for people to share with their peers and share learning is really important if you want to accelerate the use of AI. We had some really good examples where a people and culture team, we did an engagement with 500 staff. The people and culture team ended up doing their own thing, and we just supported their change champions because they could really quickly translate what we were teaching at a general level to everyday activities. And we saw that team really get some quick wins with AI early on, because they could see how it worked directly in their team. So having that community, having those people that you can connect with is great. And again, as we said before, reinforcement matters. People are busy, right? So the reason why we get AI is because we're busy, and but it takes time to learn how to use it and implement it if we're going to try and save that time in the future or reduce that busyness a bit. So having those opportunities for people to come back and learn and consistently reinforce how you use AI, and what are the opportunities you have to, solve for a task or solve for a whole process, will really help with that adoption. So if we think about what does this look like from a practical perspective, early on you might have that. You might set up a change champion community or a Copilot champion community and focus your effort there so that they can then translate that into how their team works. And you can work with those champions on an ongoing basis. Some clients are using tools like Viva Engage or setting up a team in Microsoft Teams or a large group chat even, to try and continue that reinforced learning.
And Microsoft are supporting us in doing some of that as well in terms of that reinforcement. Sometimes it's really difficult if you're new to this space as well and someone's given you the role of, oh, you need to support us in rolling this out, but you're like, I don't know what messages I need to give to reinforce the use of Copilot. So within the system, we have some reporting here that shows us what's happening with our adoption of Copilot. So we can see where that is. If we come down here and look at some of our more usage reports here. So we've got our Copilot chat, and our agents reporting here. So we can see who's using it, what's happening here. And we have some recommendations here. So these recommendations are tailored to where your organization is up to in their Copilot journey as well. So you don't have to start the reinforcement messages. So this sits under the adoption score reporting. So it is right, it looks at a number of different areas within here, but there's a new one for AI reporting. So here we can see the different usage, what's happening across those tools. So break it down looking at Copilot chat as well. For example, you can see who's using what. You do get some de-identified information here about what people are are using. You can see some of those trends that sit in here. So there's all of this really valuable information to look at the behaviours that are happening across your organisation, and how that works. You can get into more detail here about your agents, your usage. You can see who's using them, how many responses that they're getting. You can check if you're using a pay-as-you-go model for your agent consumption. You can see that consumption here of how much those agents are being used from an individual perspective, and which agents they're actually focused on, what the billing policies, where that billing is going to, how it's been set up, and who those users are. We've also got, I just wanted to come in here, if we come back in here, we've got some more, this is where we can then look more deeply at what's happening in terms of our behaviour. And we can come into that adoption score and again, look at some of those messages that can help inform and guide our people as to how they use AI across the organisation. So you've already got some built-in support there to keep that reinforcement going across the organisation.
Yeah, and I love that, especially if you're the person, like you said, you're the accidental change manager, where all of a sudden you are responsible for rolling out a change program. There are a lot of tools there which are great for reporting, but also giving you some of that messaging that you can share with other people and some of the resources yourself.
Yeah. So we just thought we'd bring this back just bringing it back to bring all those 5 capability drivers together, because we're conscious of time. So if we're bringing together our AI strategy and our leadership, if we're making that link in with our business strategy, so where AI is supporting what it is that we want to achieve from a business perspective, that we've got our governance and security, that we understand that we've got control over that. We also look at that technology and data, and we focus on our organization and our culture. We really start to see the benefits and the return on investment of AI coming together.
Yeah, and I think, maybe a question for you, Rosemary, like how would you see this in a practical rollout? So where are we seeing this come together? Because we've run a lot of sessions or run a lot of projects where sometimes these are missing, right? So in an ideal world, if we were rolling out Copilot as a new techie, how would I go about trying to align these 5 things? What are the sorts of things that we would put, or who would we bring on board to our project team to help address some of these?
Yeah, so we need a mix of people. This is quite a big and complex team when you're looking at rolling out Copilot, if you're looking to get full value out of the tool. So you would want to have your executive sponsor to be really well connected with your senior leadership team, and to be able to communicate how AI can give value to the broader strategy of the organisation, and bring in some of those strategy goals into what it is that we want to achieve. You absolutely need your governance security team. We do tend to find if we don't have our governance teams as part of the project, we'll hit a stall, and they'll put a roadblock on until they've done further investigation into governance. So bringing them in really early. We obviously need the technical teams to make sure we've enabled it appropriately, working really closely with our governance teams. We need learning and development to come on board as well, because the skills that we're looking for us to be really effective with AI link together with a broader range of skills that generally learning and development are rolling out, and we can combine some of this AI messaging as well. So we will always tend to have that core skilling component that supports that curiosity and the personal productivity. But if you then can include the use of AI and bringing AI skills into a more broader holistic learning and development component, then we start to see AI actually becomes a tool to support the business overall, and you've got that broader component of how that works. So that would be my ideal team. And then specific leaders that are coming in that you're working on and defining their use cases with them and rolling that out to demonstrate that value that Copilot's bringing on that business strategy and the business outcomes.
I think that's great. And I think if you're worried about any of these aspects not being strong, or you're not sure, like you're trying to assess what's missing, that's where the pilots work really well. So we've worked with one client who ran multiple pilots for different purposes. So being really intentional about, okay, this pilot is for us to explore the governance and security risks that creating agents internally might come up with, and we take learnings from that, and then we can adjust our policies before we go more broadly. Likewise, with tech and data, we can, run a pilot that's specifically designed to test, is our SharePoint governance where we think it is, and do some tests in that space. So piloting works really well when you're thinking about how to roll this out too, especially if you're not 100% sure where you sit with each of these. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. I know we're coming to the end of our time, so I'll just put a little bit in about licensing. So if anyone's not sure about the Copilot license structure, because there are a lot of different Copilots, Microsoft has named all of their generative AI assistants with a Copilot name. So in the Microsoft 365 stack, we have a number of different options. We have our Copilot chat, which is part of your licensing structure. So you get that with your Microsoft 365, E3, E5 or business licenses. Then we have our Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is our paid per user per month. With that, you also get Copilot Studio becomes available in that for our agent creation. And then we have a pay-as-you-go model as well, which links really well in with Copilot Chat. If you know that some of your cohorts actually just need Copilot Chat, but you've got a specific agent that you know will add value to that, but they don't need a full Copilot license, combining those two works really well together to give you the outcomes that you are looking for there. Just to kind of wrap up, we wanted to talk a little bit about that measurable return. So I think we've talked a little bit about this, Ben, as we've gone through. But what we're seeing now is that shift from time saved. That's been our measurement, and we've been able to measure that from a systems perspective or a time using AI. But actually, we're starting to see now a shift to focus on that business goal. So what is it that, as a business, we're trying to achieve first, and then deliberately bringing AI in to support that business outcome? And then our AI return on investment isn't how much time we spent using AI, it's actually did we meet the business measure, rather than how much time did we use AI in. So it's that switch of the narrative from the AI hype to focus on the business outcome, and have it focused on being really intentional and consistent and considered in the service of our business goals, not just what our AI goal was, which is this real switch in thinking from not asking what AI can do, and really that starting of asking what does the business need and how AI can help us get there. So that's kind of where we're seeing that big shift at the moment, and it's where that return on investment conversation is moving, and where organizations are actually getting real success and value out of AI. But it is a real change in thought.
Yeah. And I think I actually like the idea of going to a business process, because I think it's easier to quantify than personal productivity, right? Like you talk to someone and say, oh yeah, maybe this could have taken 2 hours and now I can do it in 15 minutes, or I've saved a week's worth of work. It's really hard to quantify that if you're being asked, what is the ROI of these license costs? But when you can take it to a business process, you can map out a whole process, and you can talk about whether that whole process has been improved, or if you're getting, one of those parts in the process could be done faster. Normally, you have a better understanding of how long a whole process takes, rather than a person's individual email writing takes, right? So if you're being asked, what is the measurable return, you'll get a much better result when you can address the whole process, as opposed to somebody saving 5 minutes on an email, 10 minutes, whatever. So switching into this focus will help you in the long run.
Yeah, fantastic. We just wanted to say a big thank you for everyone for coming along. We are kind of coming to the end of time, and we did want to allow just a couple of minutes for Q&A. But thank you very much for coming along today. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to those. So I think we'll start it off with a question in relation to sharing agents with colleagues. And tweak the terms of reference iteratively as we go. You can share agents with your colleagues, depending on, again, as an organisation, you can control that sharing capability, whether you share it to the entire organisation as you've built them, or whether you share it to specific groups like I showed earlier, or whether you just restrict sharing to being able to share out to individuals. Ben, is there anything else you wanted to add in relation to sharing agents?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of different types of agents that you can build in Copilot. If I'm thinking about what you're saying there about terms of reference, so the question is about tweaking the terms of reference iteratively, it might be something that you look at building in Copilot Studio, and then you're essentially building an internal app, or that you can then adjust some of those. Like if you have a usage policy or something like that you want to try and manage, you can do it that way. Yeah.
And if people are in different levels of a Copilot subscription, you can share agents with them. There will just be a mix of billing requirements with that, Will. So the people who have a 365 Copilot license won't use a consumption or a token. There won't be a cost to their usage. Those that are on Copilot Chat, there will be, depending on how you've set up your agent and what reference material it's using, there may be a consumption, so a cost when they use that. And you can monitor that cost as well. And it may turn out that actually if there's an agent that's used a lot across the organisation, it may be more economical to give more people licenses, or actually what they're using it for is better as a pay-as-you-go model for those that don't have a license.
Just looking at that second question from Will there as well. So there's a question around using agents with external data, and how do you, how do you govern that? Whether it's through, checking confidentiality and QA. I think that's really where the Agent 365 comes into it, where you can see what data the agents are using. But if you're building agents that are using external data, you can also do more QA work in Copilot Studio as well. So you're probably going to be using a custom connector or an out-of-the-box connector for that. It wouldn't be something that you build in your basic Copilot experience. You're shifting into the more low-code or pro-code experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can set up, as you set up those custom connectors, you can set the requirements on that and restrict access and ensure authentication and ensure that the person who's using that agent has the right access to the source data. If they don't have access to it, the agent will be able to tell them, actually, I can't give you an answer to this, you don't have the right access. So it still respects those, the access that's allowed in those different systems.
Yeah, and there's a shift now to think about agents more like virtual staff members. And so there are things like identity now for agents, where you can manage identity for them. And so you can give them permissions and access as required. So there are more tools that are available to you as well for that through the Agent 365 experience.
Yeah. Yes, we will be sharing this recording after the session. You'll receive an email later this week in relation to that. And Andrew's asked, what's the best way to get Copilot to reference only business developed FAQs in response to customer and not generate random responses? Great question, Andrew. And that's where we find, as we start to craft our instructions for our agents, is being really specific in what we want it to do. So giving it rules and guidelines, and also being really specific about what source information it uses and what it can and can't do. So it's being really specific with what you want that agent to do. So you can say, here is the reference material for you. And only want you to get answers from this. Don't make anything up. Don't reference anything outside of this. You can turn off things like going to the web to make up to find those answers. So as you craft that in Copilot Studio, you can be really specific with what access it has as a combination of settings and instructions there.
Yeah. So there are some specific settings in the agent building experience, whether it's in Studio or in Agent Builder, to toggle off to not use general knowledge, which the model's been trained on. So it'll preference the data sources that you select. The other thing is that the models are getting better now as well. So the hallucinations or making things up is reducing, which is good as well. But always, if you're creating agents, evaluation is key, and consistently maintaining that and checking up on it. So do those evaluations as you go.
We've just come to the top of the hour, so I thought I would just start to wrap things up. Thanks, Ben, for your contribution to this session today. It was fantastic. I hope everyone got a lot of insight into where Copilot's up to and how to get real measured value out of Copilot altogether.
Thanks. I'll wrap it up from here if you like, Rosemary. So guys, that's a wrap for today's session. A big thank you to all of you for attending. Also a big thanks to Rosemary and Brian for sharing their knowledge on Copilot and their experience. If there's something that really resonated with you, or you'd like to talk to Generation E in more detail about how you want to get more from your Copilot deployment, and the contact details are on screen at the moment, please feel free to get in touch. The recording, as we said, will be made available to everyone later in the week. And thank you for your time today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone. Have a good week.